Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word. Today is Tuesday, April 6th. It's a beautiful morning this morning, another springtime day. And so glad you could join me for our few minutes together as we take a little bit of a dive into our daily word and to our conversation around it today as we gather. Today, I'm out at Carter and Hudson's house spending the morning with them. So my background looks a little different. It's because I'm in Dustin and Mindy's dining room sitting at the table. And the boys are playing, watching TV. I'm not sure what they're doing, but they're pretty self-sufficient. No, they are actually fine. So glad you could join me for our few minutes together today. So we have heard from this Deuteronomy text before, and I know that we have. And this piece from Deuteronomy really gives us the guide about how we're called to live with each other and what it is that God calls us to do in our life together. And so just these couple of verses from the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy, where I'm going to start is in verse 5, but prior to that, the first 4 verses talks to us about how we're called to live with each other and what it is that God calls us to in the midst of sharing our lives with each other. And so this chapter starts about the commands and decrees and the laws that God gave Moses to teach to them, and that they're to love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love the neighbor as their self. And then we go a little further and we hear then these verses from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. These commands that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. And so the great commandment of the Old Testament and, of course, the New Testament, when Jesus is challenged about it, is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And that's how this chapter starts. And so after we hear that command, then Moses goes on to share about what this really means. So, sometimes we think that this concept of loving God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength and loving our neighbor as ourselves is some kind of theoretical, abstract command that if we do it, fine, and if we don't do it, fine, and if we can't really find our way there, then that's really okay. But the writer of this and the scripture reminds us that these really aren't some abstract commands that were given. It really is a practical order about how we're called to live our lives. Now, I know that we all live our lives, mostly all of us probably, in some practical order of things, the way that we line out our days, the way that we do certain things. And, when we deviate from that, we don't always appreciate how that affects our life. These commands given to us in this book of Deuteronomy is really a practical order of how we're called to live with each other. And here's the challenge that I think we often find with all of Scripture and all how we're called to live our lives. The truth is that this command to love God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we really can't do it or shouldn't do it or aren't supposed to do it only on Sunday morning or when people are watching or when it's convenient or when we understand why we're doing it or when it feels easy or we feel like doing it. These really aren't, for us as we live our lives, some kind of compartmentalized commands that we go in and out of our lives with. The love of God and the love for each other is not meant for the back burner, if you will. It's really meant as a guide to the practical order of our lives. It's often, I think every night, Diane and I have this conversation at some point before we go to bed. So, what are we doing tomorrow? What's tomorrow look like? We talk about what we're going to do at work, what it is that we have to accomplish. We talk about what we're going to have for supper. We talk about all these kind of things, and then sometimes, we add a couple days on depending on what's going on in our lives, and that's the practical order of how we do things. Today, Diane got her second vaccine, and so I had to make sure we had the alarm set for the right time because she had to be there at 7 o'clock. And so the practical order of how we do things and the routine that we do things. And so I arrived here at Dustin and Mindy's house to watch the boys today. And there's the practical order of how we do things. And we all live that way, right? This command that we hear in Deuteronomy and hear again from Jesus in the Gospels isn't meant for the back burner. It's true, though, that this command to love God and love our neighbor can be complicated and can be difficult. There are times, in our lives that we're frustrated by the things that happen and by the life that God has given us, and times that we don't always understand what God's doing in our life. And we just sometimes, when it comes to this loving God, loving our neighbor thing, we just flat out don't want to. And we get distracted by all the things in our life. And so sometimes we turn these commands into things that are, kind of situational. Only when we want to, or only when it's convenient, or only when we need help. But the commands that we're given is really meant to be a way of life. Yesterday, I had an email come across in my computer about community and about neighborhood and about how the church and the neighborhood are connected. And I got to thinking about that. 67 years ago, when our church was built up on Ohio Avenue, we kind of invaded that space and built it there. And for the last 9 years that I've been the pastor at St. Paul's, we've really tried hard to connect to our neighborhood. And we've done pretty well. When people come for National Night Out or Trunk or Treat, they appreciate what we do. And we're going to have a couple of new events this year to invite the community to be part of who we are. And I was reading all these articles about what it means to make the neighborhood our neighborhood, and the neighborhood, the church's neighborhood, and the church part of the neighborhood. And it's a fascinating idea. And it came back to me in reading some of those articles that this idea is really tied back to the scripture, and it really is meant for us to be, that it becomes a way of life for us. That we're supposed to talk about these things. The idea that they should swim in our head, they should be with us when we go to sleep and be with us when we wake up to a new day. They should be as a mark on our forehead. They should be tied around our wrist when we sit down, when we rise up, when we stay, knowing that that's how we're called to live with each other and to treat each other in such an important and powerful way. And so I thought about this scripture this morning as it relates to all of that. And I have all these ideas swimming around in my head about connecting again with our neighborhood in bigger ways. And we're actually talking about this year doing National Night Out in a little bit of a different, well, actually a lot of a different way. And having this longest table kind of meal that we're going to share. And that simply is for us not to gain new members, but to just be connected, to love God and love our neighbor. And that's all that we're called to do. What, Bobby? And so this challenge really lies on all of us and how we're called to live together. And so maybe this will resonate with us. Maybe we really do need this. What's the matter? He's okay. We really do need this to become a part of who we are and a part of our life that we live together. You want to come up here? You want to come up here and say hi? You want to come up here and say hi? Come here. Come here, Hudson. So the boys are getting a little anxious. So maybe this call that's on us is more than just when it's convenient. It's really needs to become a part of who we are. And so this shh, come here. Come here, buddy. Come here. What's the matter? Hey. Here. This call of Moses. Talk about them when you sit at home and you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Paul doesn't mean it in his mouth. If we let that become a part of who we are, then the world becomes a better place. And we've made a difference then in those around us. So maybe this will become part of our mantra as we live our lives together in the future. So may we know of love and peace and grace and mercy in our lives. May we know of the kind of love that's incumbent on us to love God with all that we have and love our neighbors as ourselves. Might we know peace that the disciples knew when they were afraid. And so, friends, know of God's love for all of you. Know of my love for you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day. You tell them bye, Hudson. Tell them bye. Not going to